All right, it's 12 o'clock, ladies. Let's get started. I'm Trish Johnson, for those of you Barnes, and this month we have Kimberly. I hope I pronounced this correctly. Tissot.
It's Tissot. The T on the end is silent.
Okay, just want to make sure. And she is the President and Chief Executive Officer of ABLE, South Carolina, where she guides the staff in applying the philosophy of independent living to the real situations. Kimberly believes in value of individualized and community-based empowerment. She wants people to recognize their full potential. Under Kimberly's leadership, AbleSC has experienced years of growth, success, and it's become a nationally recognized center for independent living. Kimberly's road to disability rights began at an early age after having her leg amputated, childhood cancer. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. It looks like a sarcoma. Kimberly began deciding her style of mobility, became the first soccer player to go down. It's pretty different. She has over 20 years of experience advocating for disability inclusion on a local, state, and federal level, also international education, and a master's of social work from the University of South Carolina. In 2017, Kimberly led the efforts in the passing of progressive legislation in South Carolina, Persons with Disabilities Right to Parent Act. And in 2018 and in 2022, ending sub-minimum wages in South Carolina. Kimberly mentors other centers for independent living across the nation due to her marked success in the field. She also serves as an executive director, mentor to the South Carolina nonprofit organization via the state's nonprofit association. Someone needs to mute their, okay. In addition to Kimberly's role at the Able South SC, she has successfully held multiple state appointed responsibilities, served on various states and national committees, and it's the Association a program for rural independent living board president. Kimberly was also mastermind behind several statewide initiatives that have led to major system changes in South Carolina. Those efforts include SC's first statewide youth transition conference, Advocacy Day for Access and Independence, SC's Disability Employment Coalition, SC Disability Partners, and especially interest includes parenting with disability, ADA civil rights, engaging in early youth transition, universal design, developing new disability rights leaders, legislative disability rights advocacy, and advancing disability employment and awareness. When Kimberly isn't at Able SC, she is making precious memories with her husband and son. So welcome, Kimberly. How are you?
Hey guys, how are you?
Doing very well.
Good. I do have a PowerPoint, so I will go ahead and
Please do.
start. And let me know, can you see the main screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and start, but I'm so happy to be here with you all. And if we could we do a quick introduction just so that I can know everyone in the room today?
If everybody will please unmute. I'm Trish Johnson. As I said, I'm the facilitator. I'm in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I am the CEO of Labyrinth Consultants, and I have been with the WIL program for over 2 years. So JG, if you would start.
Good morning. I am Janice McMillan. I am pastor of St. Mark AME Church in Johnsonville, South Carolina, and I am a newbie.
Thank
Oh,
you.
great.
Karen.
Oh, I'm Karen Woodfalk. I am the Director of Student Affairs at the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education.
Mia.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mia Miller. I am actually here in Indian Land, South Carolina. I am retired Air Force. I've served over 20 years in the United States Air Force, and currently I am doing some consulting with CVS Health, and I also have my own company, Women Doing Our Own Thing, where I offer business process improvement consulting.
Thanks, Mia. Karen? You'll unmute yourself.
If I'm the only Karen, I just introduced myself.
Oh, I'm sorry, Karen. I'm getting confused. All right. Beth, I don't believe you've been introduced.
No, I just joined in. I'm
Okay.
Beth Abrazino. I work with Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina.
Mia Jackson, if you will unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning. Mia Jackson with Department of Corrections, but I'm also a member of the Junior League.
Thank you. Karen Woodfalk, would you please unmute yourself?
That's me again, Karen Woodfall.
Sorry, Karen. What happens if it flips around on me? If everyone will unmute themselves right now so I can see who's in line, it would help.
Okay, and again, I'm with the Commission on Higher Education.
Yeah,
here
I'm
in
sorry,
Newport.
Karen. My
Thank you.
apologies. And if you will raise, if you know how to use your buttons, raise your hand if you have not been introduced.
Separated by.
Okay, yeah. Okay, Jasmine, if you will introduce yourself and keep, and then unraise your hand.
Okay. Hi, ladies. My name is Jasmine Destiny. I'm currently an analyst for TD Bank. I have a ministry called Garden Club in Christ, where we meet Fridays for Friday evenings at 8 p.m. for prayer. But yeah, I'm Jasmine Destiny. Hi, everyone.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hello, my name is. Oh, sorry.
Paris? Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Paris Mabane. I'm an extension associate with Princeton University.
Okay. Michelle?
Yes, my name is Michelle Gilmajor. I am a newbie as well. I have a business called Empower Educational Planning Services. And I just known Kina for a while and decided to come on.
Great, thank you. Levitt?
Hi, my name is Lavette Morris, and I'm a training coordinator with South Carolina Department of Admin, and I also have a breast cancer support nonprofit. And I have just been looking for ways to get involved and be in leadership locally. So that is why I'm here.
And Terry?
Hi, my name is Terry McGill. I'm from Greenville, South Carolina, and I am the owner of Bridge Consulting Group.
And have I missed anybody? Great, I think we can get started now, Kimberly.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much. Well, I'm gonna introduce myself. I am Kimberly Tissot, and I am the president and CEO of ABLE South Carolina. And I'll tell you a little bit about that on the next slide of what our organization does. But I lead a team of 60 employees. We have 34 programs and a budget of about 8 million. We have not always been this size. When I took on the organization, we only had 5 staff members and a budget of a little over $500,000. So we have significantly grown. I've been the president and CEO since 2010. And I just celebrated my 13th anniversary here. I have a master's of social work from USC, and that should be another bullet, but I am also a disabled woman, as you see on the screen. I am a woman, a white woman with blonde hair. I'm wearing glasses, a red shirt, a black blazer, and I have one leg, and I yield. Sorry, guys. There's a lot of feedback.
Whoever, please mute your phone.
All right. So So I use crutches to walk on, and that's my style of mobility. You don't know how many times I get asked, why don't you use a prosthetic? And those things are very uncomfortable and very hot in the summers. So I am more comfortable on my crutches and get around really well with them. I am also a wife and a mother. So I've been married for about 18 years, and I have a little boy. He's not little boy anymore. He's 13. And he also has a disability. He has an intellectual disability. My leadership style is I am a servant leadership. That's kind of where I land every time I take those leadership quizzes. And my practice is around disability rights and disability justice advocacy and activism. I've earned multiple awards, not that that means anything to me, but I just thought I would put that on there. And I am considered a national and international expert in disability rights and disability justice. I'm an openly and proud disabled leader. A lot of times people don't talk very much about their disability. And I think it's time that we start to talk more about disability and really normalize that as we are a very large population in the country. I'm a cancer survivor. I had stage 4 avallar rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a muscle cancer that spreads in your lymph nodes. And I was 2 years old when I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I had my leg amputated and had several years of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And if anyone has had cancer, usually once you've had cancer and survive it, you're not done with some of the impact, because of the radiation and chemotherapy usually causes a little bit of disturbance. I am a change maker, and I'm also a lobbyist. I work up at the State House. Within my role as president and CEO of ABLE South Carolina, we have been able to pass 3 pieces of legislation in the last couple of years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But we're definitely making change in the way that we learn by what needs to change is the same people that we serve. We listen to the disability community, and from there we make changes. So the organization is called ABLE South Carolina. We have been in place since 1994. And we are an organization of people with disabilities leading the charge. So we are run and operated by the majority of people with disabilities. So our staff and board, our board is comprised of about 68% of our board are people with disabilities, and our staff were around 93%. So pretty significant. And it's very important to represent the community that you serve. What our organization does, we do a number of things. So we had to actually create a 3-pronged mission. We equip people with disabilities with the tools to foster pride and direct their own lives. And so what that means is we provide individual support to people to assist them with removing the barriers in their life. What do they want to do to be independent? Sometimes it looks different for everyone. Sometimes they have to learn how to adjust to their disability, or they may have to just learn how to do things differently. And a lot of times people without disabilities cannot teach that or understand that philosophy. And so they learn from us. So we've got a lot of staff members that provide that one-on-one direct service. We also educate the community to challenge stereotypes and eliminate barriers in the community. And so that's through a lot of our education. We assist businesses, state agencies, local government, federal government, private businesses, schools, colleges, with really taking in that equity piece, because DEI is not really an inclusive effort if you don't include all marginalized community. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but disability is a marginalized community. And so we've got to make sure that we're providing a lot of education to remove those barriers in the community. And a lot of that is by making people realize that they've got to include disability in their work. We also advocate for access, equity, and inclusion at the individual, state, and local level and national level to ensure that the rights of people with disabilities are being protected, but also being respected. Making sure that if we see policies and laws that need to be changed, we make sure that we step in and advocate for laws to be changed as well. So we've been really successful with that piece. How I became a leader, and I'll tell you, started really early. So as I mentioned, I am a cancer survivor, and I really learned the difference when I was a very young child. When I was 2 years old, and this was a picture of me sitting on a chair, and I had just recently had my leg amputated, and you can actually see the gauze sticking out of my shorts. But this is really when I started to learn that the world is a little bit different when you have a disability, and maybe not really technically set up for people with disabilities or people who may be different. And so I learned how to adapt to my disability. And when I say adapt, there's no pity here. I don't wish I had 2 legs. This is who I am. I've learned how to adapt in society and accomplish goals and careers and bucket lists. Have been able to do all of that with my disability. It just really takes understanding how to adapt, but also advocating for the rights that we have. I've navigated barriers and had to create solutions that have never been problem solved. And a great example of that is when I was a young kid with a disability, I wanted to play soccer in our town. And as Trish mentioned, I was the first soccer player with 1 leg or with a disability in our town. And a lot of that was advocacy at a very young age. I had to, when my mother took me to go register for soccer, they said, "I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to play." And I asked them why, and they said, "We just don't have any policies, any rules. We don't know what to do." And so I stood right there and I convinced them, of how we can establish goals together. Establish rules, but the way that I looked at it is I'll just not kick with both my crutches and my leg. I'll just kick with one of my crutches and one of my leg and my only leg, and that would not give me an advantage. And so they saw things a little bit differently through my eyes and ended up accepting me to play soccer. And so really, but I created a different understanding for them of how to include people who they might not typically include. I understand, I have a great understanding of the world and how it isn't designed for people with disabilities, but it should be. And and a lot of my understanding is through just observation, watching and thinking about what needs to be changed. And that was kind of all throughout my childhood and adulthood. It's just seeing what I was not welcome to or excluded from, and really thinking and observing, wow, this would be an easy fix, or wow, they really need to have some education because I'm not the only person in the world with a disability. And then also speaking up anytime I saw injustice for people with disabilities or other marginalized communities. I really feel that all marginalized communities should stick together because we are stronger together, but also when one community is being discriminated against, we are all being discriminated against. So I really take in solidarity, but also really looking at intersections of disability is truly important to me, as disability does intersect with all communities. I grabbed the vice president's leg to get his attention at one time. And so you'll see me as a child. I actually was at an event when former Vice President Bush Sr. Was at an event, and he walked by and I grabbed his leg and told him a little bit about why I was there. And I was there for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and he ended up picking me up, and it became this huge photo opportunity, but really being outspoken, educating people as much as I could as a young child and now to the adult life about people who may have had cancer, about people who have disabilities. So really never was, actually I was a little shy of a child, except when it came to talking about disability, because I also noticed that people were really ashamed of disability, or they didn't know how to act in front of people with disabilities, or they may have been nervous or not know what to say. And so I was able to really start doing that type of work as a child. Talking about disability, and let me talk with you a little bit about the population that I represent, but also serve. Disability is the largest minority group throughout America. And so data shows about 1 in 4 people have a disability throughout the United States. South Carolina, it's 1 in 3. So we have a higher than national rate of disability. And when I say disability, I'm talking about physical, vision, hearing, mental health, learning, healthcare needs, intellectual, developmental, genetics. And so thinking about it from a very broad perspective, and that's actually the definition of disability is under the Americans with Disabilities Act. The definition of disability is it has to impact 1 or more major life activities. And so think about that. Think about life activities being walking, hearing, seeing, breathing. Asthma is considered a disability. Heart health issues are disabilities, pulmonary. And so really anyone that has any limitations to their daily life activities, then that is actually considered a disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's very, very broad. But disability is a protected class, meaning that we have protections within employment. We have other significant civil rights. We have the Individualized Individual or Disability Education Act, which is IDEA for short, which gives students with disabilities the right to free and appropriate education in the most inclusive environment with accommodations. And as you can imagine, that's not really occurring very well. A lot of people misinterpret the laws, but also some of our laws are not held, are not very well enforced. The Americans with Disabilities Act was supposed to eliminate discrimination on the basis of disability throughout America. So people with disabilities should have access to all things, employment, all programs and services, websites, making sure that websites are accessible for people who are blind. And the list goes on and on. So there should be no discrimination. However, that's not true either. And then again, that's going back to that enforcement. We have the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which was our first law to protect the rights of people with disabilities in federal government. And that was passed in 1973. And that was supposed to anyone receiving any type of federal funding or any federal agencies must accommodate and provide services to people with disabilities. So there should be no discrimination. But as in with any rights laws or any civil rights laws, they're complaint based. And so you have to make a complaint to be able to really have your rights enforced. And so throughout, your United States and throughout South Carolina, even, there's a lot of barriers that continue to exist for people with disabilities. I have the Affordable Cares Act as well. So all doctors' offices are supposed to be accessible. There should be no discrimination on the basis of disability among other protected classes, but still healthcare is one of the big issues for people with disabilities, is because clinics and hospitals even aren't accessible or inclusive of disability needs. So most likely, then this is what we tell everyone, is most likely you will have a disability if you live long enough. Most people do acquire disability later in life. And it's not a bad club to be in. However, the bias that surrounds disability is something that people are really afraid of. We intersect with all communities again, so disability does not discriminate on the basis of race, socioeconomics, education, it's across the board. And so as we're seeing a lot of wonderful DEI initiatives, sometimes what we're seeing is disability being excluded, which is continuing marginalization across all other marginalized communities, because disability is within all marginalized community populations as well. And so something that we're really trying to work on with educating individuals of that, because we don't want other marginalized communities discriminating against other marginalized communities, but that is something that still occurs within all angles. We also have higher unemployment rates. And so when you look at South Carolina, we have a relatively okay unemployment rate right now, but South Carolina is 9th in the country for having the lowest unemployment rate for people with disabilities. And so that's something we're educating and making sure that people with disabilities are included in education and employment efforts, and really working with employers to equip them with the skills they need to be able to hire talented employees. And we're also often afterthoughts. And so, and I'll give you a really great example of this. When COVID-19 happened, no matter what your political stance is, but when COVID happened, it killed people with disabilities much quicker than it killed anyone else. And so we had to advocate, but we were not prioritized within any of the initiatives, not even within the vaccination rollout, until we as in our state, within our organization, but also around the country of disability-led organizations, really putting the alarm bells on that, hey, you forgot about us, and the majority of people who are dying are people with disabilities. But we were an afterthought. CDC was not putting information specifically out for us, and the states were not doing that as well. And so we have made a lot of system change in that area. We did end up prioritizing the vaccination for people with disabilities within South Carolina DHEC, but it did take a lot of advocacy to get them to understand why. And in 2020, and just to show you the significance of this, in 2020, COVID was the leading cause of death for people with intellectual disabilities. So out of anything that else could happen, it was COVID that was killing people at a higher rate. So that was pretty significant. But this is common to see. We always have to advocate to be included in a lot of efforts. So we're always busy and always working here at ABLE South Carolina. Just disability discrimination occurs when disability is often not included in leadership or in DEI initiatives. And so you don't often see people in leadership who have disabilities. And that can mean a number of different reasons why. Either they're not getting those opportunities, or they're also not talking about their disabilities, because some disabilities are invisible. And so, having that platform and really having that power to be able to change culture is really important. Federal disability rights laws are not always recognized as civil rights laws, and they're just disregarded oftentimes. And so again, it's complaint-based. And so there's no one that is enforcing disability rights within state government, local government. And so that's something that has really landed on our organization, is to be able to work with state and local government and businesses to really help them with complying, but also just making it right and making things accessible for all people with disabilities. No representation, people with disabilities aren't always at the table. And so when programs and services are being taught about disability, sometimes we're not there. We're not there listening to people who learned about disabilities, or people who or parents of children with disabilities, and that's their perspective. It's not the disability community perspective for parents. And so that's something that we're always bringing awareness of, but you don't see this happening, or we don't want to see this happening with other marginalized communities. And I often compare this to, you know, we don't, as women all on this call, we do not like men making decisions for us. We do not like men leading charges of service and programs for women, but the same goes for disability. People without disabilities should not be running programs and services about people with disabilities when they don't have that lived experience. We've noticed that a lot of the discrimination occurs from some of these programs that within disability organizations, even because disability is not truly understood, and the impact of societal ableism. And that notions that disabled people don't belong in the workplace or community. And that's something I think we see the most is, and I think it's also one of those assumptions that if you have a disability, you can't work, you go collect Social Security. But Social Security is about a little over $700. Who can live off of that? And we don't want to live off of that. We want to have careers and have families and, you know, be able to contribute to society. And so that's something that we're also trying to change. There are populations that struggle with working, and there's also significant systems issues. And so we support Social Security. We definitely know that it can be used either as a stepping stone for a young person, or if somebody does acquire a significant disability that prevents them from working, then that's definitely some cushion, but it's not really, it really keeps people in poverty. And that's something that we're also trying to change. And then also ridiculous words are used for disability. And this is also a piece of the discrimination is people have created words kind of to get around saying disabled or disability. And so some of these words are special needs. We hate that word. We've never approved that word. That was created by the education system and parents of children with disabilities. We've heard handy capable, which is, guys, I don't even know what that means. We've heard differently abled. But none of those words are put into our civil rights. It is disability and disabled, and that's the word that the disability community prefers. And also when we're creating these different words for young people with disabilities, not being able to say that they have a disability to protect their rights, or not being able to be proud of who they are with their disability, and using the word disability is something that has really played into low self-esteem for youth with disabilities. My activism is disability-led leadership, obviously wanting to make sure that people with disabilities are in leadership, and when they are in leadership, that they're protecting rights and speaking about their disabilities to help change the culture, but also to have role models. The more people with disabilities in the community, the more people, youth in particular, they see people with disabilities like them in the community, and it really makes a difference. Disability rights, equitable opportunities, and I do say equitable. I don't want equal opportunities. No, disability community does not want equal opportunities. We want equitable opportunities, because sometimes accommodations are going to have to come into play, and that is what creates equity for us. Disability justice disability justice means that we're also very mindful about the intersections of disability. So we are fighting against all of the isms within society. So racism, disability, ableism, sexism, so all ageism, all of those, because again, the disability intersects with all of those. And when somebody with a disability is part of another marginalized community, the chances are they are being discriminated at a higher rate. And that actually data shows that. And so great examples of this is even with police violence, higher data does show that people with disabilities are often victimized by police, but obviously a higher rate also shows that people with disabilities who are Black or brown are also discriminated at a higher rate. But over 50% of the deaths related to police violence are people with disabilities who are Black. So that is something that is not talked about often, and something that we see when it is talked about in the news. Sometimes disability isn't even brought up, or a disabled person who may have been killed is not even mentioned in the news. And so that's something that our organization is working on as well. Employment, education reform. We as a disability community believe that there's a lot of reform to do within employment, but also education, because there's a deep research shows that there's a deep connection with discrimination and ableism coming out of the school system. Kids are not being included in general ed classrooms. They're being suspended at higher rates, expelled at higher rates. And so we really feel the education system is not working for students with disabilities, and there needs to be some serious reform. We do anti-ableism work, so making sure that, especially protecting the rights of people with disabilities and making sure that they're included. Youth leadership, that is our generation that we are significantly invested in, with helping build the next generation of disability rights advocates and disability justice activists. We learn from the disability community to make change, and that's one of, I think, our most successful tools in our toolbox, is that we learn from the people that we serve. We learn from them bringing barriers to us, or when they're seeing discrimination in the community, we're learning from them and doing something about what they are experiencing through either education or advocacy. So we're doing a lot around that. Disabled parents' rights is one of my things closest to my heart, is the rights of disabled parents, not parents of children with disabilities, but actual disabled parents. When I went to adopt, and this is a national issue, and I'm just sharing my personal story just to kind of show you how significant it is. We adopted from DSS, my husband and I, and in the very beginning phases of going through that adoption process, we were actually told we could not adopt because I had a physical disability. And obviously they did not know who they were talking to, but we ended up adopting. But when I came to Able, South Carolina, we saw these calls happening. We saw the same experience. People were having their children removed from the hospital if they were blind. Somebody who's blind has already learned how to adapt. They have no use for vision. They've never had vision, and people have not understood that. So they would, Department of Social Services with law enforcement obviously would go in and remove children when they were born to disabled parents, or they would be removed later on just for the lack of understanding. And so we've done a lot of work around the rights of disabled parents. Pay equity, data shows that people with disabilities are paid lower than people without disabilities across all genders. And then healthcare, we have issues with access to healthcare. I think it's an assumption that that the disability community is always either we're sick or we work really closely with doctors and they control our lives. We don't want them to control our lives, but we do want to get equitable healthcare, which is not always available to us. We have to travel long distances, far distances to find doctors that understand disability a lot of times, and the standard of care also does not work for a lot of people with disabilities. And so what that means is there has to be an adjustment to healthcare provided when somebody has a condition on top of conditions. So what drives me is, elevating the disability voice. This is what I wake up and want to do every morning, is is making sure that the disability voice is being heard across South Carolina, across the country. But also equity. Equity is not understood. I think it's a word that people use a lot, but not understanding that everybody in society really has different needs. And equity is never going to be achieved until everyone has that viewpoint, and that viewpoint has to include disability as well. And within this slide, I am talking about equity here, and this is a great example. I'm sure a lot of people have seen photos of differences between equality and equity, but I think this one shows really good, just an example of what people with disabilities may experience. And so the equity box shows a person with a wheelchair and a person who is standing up at a four shelf bookshelf. The person using a wheelchair probably won't be able to reach the third and fourth shelf. And the person who is standing with two legs, do we know even if they can bend over to go to the first shelf? Probably, maybe, but a lot of people can't. But they most likely may have access to all four shelves. The equity picture is somebody using a wheelchair with two shelves for their bookcase, so they can access the first and second, and then the person who is standing has a 4-shelf bookshelf. And so this just kind of shows you that, you know, people may just need things a little bit differently, but it doesn't mean that they should not participate. And until we really understand that piece, I think our society is going to be behind with all pieces of equity. And the same goes for, you know, people who are blind. It's an assumption that people who are blind don't access the websites or access phones, and that's not true. There's actually a whole law behind it that shows that, you know, that requires your website to be accessible. And it's just little changes that makes it accessible, but understanding that accessibility shouldn't be seen as optional is critical to moving us forward to being equitable. My experience as a leader, you know, it's been good and bad. There's been a lot of fight in the game, a lot of long nights, a lot of tears, as in any leadership position. But I am dedicated to being a social change maker. I want to make sure that we are making a change. I hope that I can see a lot more in my lifetime, but if not, I really want to make sure that I'm paving the road for youth to pick up and after my lifetime. Creating a movement. We are creating a movement and inventing the wheel a lot of times. Our programs are not anywhere close to being duplicable services because our approach is very different. We are having to invent the wheel a lot of times to bring the disability space into the picture. We've breaking stereotypes, and I've broken stereotypes. You have no idea how many times people come up to me just in public and say, you drive a car, or you work, or, oh, you have children, or is your husband disabled? Are you married? You married to somebody who's not disabled? These comments just are ongoing. And so really just I want to break these stereotypes. Mentoring and redefining what disability means. And so mentoring others about disability, but also mentoring disabled leaders, combating ableism. I should probably say, I really want to abolish it, but right now I'm really just combating it as I see it. Of course, even going up to the State House sometimes and lobbying my non-disabled counterparts, like questions will go to them when I'm the president and CEO of our organization. And sometimes, I have to kind of assert myself a little strongly sometimes to be taken seriously, because even disability changes how people approach you or ask you questions. We're developing change within our organization, but also within the state. We have been able to put our state on the map for some areas of disability rights. So we are leading in abolishing a law that allowed disabled people to be paid sub-minimum wage, and so making less than minimum wage. So we ended that law last year. We also passed the Persons with Disabilities Right to Parent Act, which protects the legal rights of people with disabilities in our state. We actually had a law in our state that said that a child could be removed on the basis of disability if their parents had a disability. So it was ridiculous. So we had to go back and change that, but we were the 16th state to do that. We were the 13th state to end sub-minimum wage. And we also have been able to develop systems change within government, within data collection, but also related to employment. Being tenacious and assertive is kind of the biggest skills that I pull out of my toolbox, as well as not taking no for an answer, especially when I know it's right. And then just having to assert myself. Being multi-marginalized as a disabled woman. So I am multi-marginalized just by being a woman and being a person with a disability. So I do get treated a little bit different, even several times up at the State House, but also just in the general community. And this looks different for everyone. So there's been studies that show like a white woman with a disability is discriminated more than a white man with a disability. A Black woman with a disability is discriminated more than a white woman with a disability. And so there's a lot of layers within these marginalizations. And, you know, I'm an educator. I've had to turn into an educator. And sometimes I like that and sometimes I don't, because sometimes I like to go places and not have to educate someone about disability or accessibility or being at the table, only bringing up disability issues. And so I've seen some change in that over the last couple of years where people are really including the disability voice. And so that's amazing to see. And then disability leadership is vital. This is an area that's not talked about very much. We have a saying that's nothing about us without us. It's not going to work when you don't include the population that you're talking about. We are underrepresented at the tables. We are underrepresented in leadership. Leaders aren't always being transparent about their disability. And that's critical for us to talk about because again, 1 in 3 people have a disability. And so that means probably several of us have disabilities on this call today. And maybe you haven't identified, maybe you haven't talked about it, or maybe you didn't realize it was protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act and that you are considered a person with a disability. And then just lack of role models. I never really had a role model when I was growing up who was a person with a disability. And so we've got to build that. We've got to show people about disability and talk about it. I know when Mia McLeod at the State House, when she was running for governor, she mentioned, you know, having sickle cell anemia. And I just gave her like high fives, kudos, because we've got to talk about that because there's kids out there who also have sickle cell anemia and they're seeing this woman running for governor who also has it. And so we really have to elevate leadership within disability and talk about it. And then just some words of advice that I always give people is just to be bold, step out of what is the standard. Don't, if you see something that needs to be changed or doesn't sound right, don't shake your head yes. Challenge people, be bold and don't, sometimes being louder does win. Remember, you are human. At the end of the day, you're human. You're going to have feelings. You're going to cry. You're going to have great days. You're going to have pain some days. Like, you're human, and you've got to give yourself grace. Don't get comfortable, because once we get comfortable, I think that's when leaders go into a status quo, where sometimes they even cause more harm when they get comfortable. And so really always look for learning, learn from people and make changes, learn from the community and make changes. Also, it's important to build people, because not one person in this whole world can do everything. So we've got to build people and have and create these leaders throughout the community. Honor the past. What has happened in the past has been great and may have paved the way for us, but push towards the future. And I talk about this a lot when we're talking about disability rights. I am so thankful that people with disabilities, and every single piece of disability rights legislation, people with disabilities created and advocated for. We are the ones that pushed it, but we're not often the people included on implementing it, which is the problem. But I really appreciate what the disabled leaders have done in our past, but we also have to push forward to make sure that it's working now, and there needs to be changes. And I think that's probably what they would want as well. Include disability, or you aren't inclusive, equitable, or even diverse, because remember, there's multi layers of what diversity means. I think a lot of people in the marginalized community they kind of cringe when we're starting to hear diversity, because what does it really mean to people? Is it just a word that people are saying, or does it really have initiatives behind it that are being followed through? Be open about yourself. And I say this, talk about yourself, talk about your lived experiences. As with any injustice that you experience, people learn from that. And people also, I think sometimes the vulnerability really makes change, is showing people the impact that injustice may have had on you or on your community, and share those stories. Don't take things personally. I've learned that a long time ago, because we are pushing people. Sometimes I make people cry, and I don't mean to. I'm just educating them. But the reason I make them cry is sometimes they think that they're doing something really great for the disability community, but I'll say, actually that's, causing a little bit more damage, and they will be so upset and so mad. But don't take it personally, because you're doing the right thing by standing up for someone's rights, or standing up for your community rights, or just civil rights in general. Keep learning and include people in that learning. And again, I can't say this enough, but learn from people. Learn from the experience of people. And when you do, and even when you learn from people with disabilities, you'll learn we want to work, we want a family, we want to have that equitable access in the community to all things. We don't want separate schools and separate employment. We don't want separate places to live. We want to be in the community. And I think that's not heard all the time, because again, people are speaking up for us a lot of times. Don't sit back when you see change needed. I think that's one of my pet peeves, is let's change it. If you see something that is not, people aren't being treated right, something's not being followed, speak up. Because otherwise you have a lot of other people that are just going with the flow and not speaking up, and then it continues an ongoing cycle. Promote your work, not your work, and that speaks volumes. And that's something that I've won awards, but I'm always red in the face and not always comfortable with getting awards. But the reason I got awards a lot of times is because of my work. It's the work that we're doing here at AbleSC. It's the advocacy that we're doing. So I see people, doing a lot of self-promoting. Self-promote your work, because that I think is just so respected. And so these would be just my words of advice for anyone in leadership. And I probably learn something from other people every day that this list keeps growing and growing. And so I will open it up for questions and
So we
comments.
just have a few minutes, about 5 minutes before we end. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. That way I can read them off to Kimberly. I want to thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, thank you, because it's been very interesting. I like the fact that you recognize it as a woman and disabled. You're doubly, discriminated against in a lot of ways. That can be very difficult. And maybe you can quickly give an example of how you overcame that. Anything specific that came to your mind that was probably the most profound discrimination against you as a woman and a disabled woman that you overcame, and how you did so.
Yeah, I think I would probably say that is within employment, just my employment past. I've seen, I've seen the sexism and the ableism. I've seen, I've witnessed that. And, again, we all have rights. Women are protected class as well. And so that's something that we've really got to utilize a lot more. Is that we have the right for equal pay. We have the right for employment. We have the right to be in leadership. And so I think that's oftentimes when I've been in leadership opportunities, it's usually having to push through men.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
we can all relate to that in some way. shape, or
Yeah.
form. I have Matrice. She wants to know if she can get would like to connect with you about this as being a disabled.
Yeah.
You could pop your email address or website
Absolutely.
that chat so everybody can see that. One of the biggest things for we believe in our advocacy groups are to stay connected, to build our network of women. I always say that it's your circle of women that will keep you strong with everything. And finding funding, that's always an interesting, fun thing to do. So how do you find funding?
Oh, I feel like I write a grant every single day. So we have about 38 grants within our organization. So we have one federal grant that's like our base federal grant, but it's a federal grant that requires us to diversify within our own communities. So we are constantly working with funders, working with state agencies for contracts, working with businesses, and applying for grants that are not always disability focused, that maybe are about homelessness, and we're putting that disability piece. But because actually, guess who the population that are most unhoused are actually people with disabilities. So a lot of times that's not focused on. People who have a higher rate of living in poverty are people with disabilities. And then that data just goes increases and increases within the marginalizations. And so lots of thinking outside the box and applying for many of the grants that we see open, and putting that disability spin on.
Perfect. I think that's great advice. I know that the South Carolina Able Service Low Country, specifically in Allendale County.
So we can come there for our advocacy. We don't have funding for individual services there, but we can come there for many of our other programs. So we've got a lot of youth programs, we've got employment programs, we've got a lot of advocacy initiatives, leadership development that happens statewide.
Great. Well, it's time, like I tell all my ladies that come onto this, we start on time, we end on time, because everybody's time is valuable. I do want to say that next month, the first Tuesday is July 4th, and we will not be meeting. We're going to skip July, and we will pick up again in August. You will all be seeing emails, and keep your eyes open for the newsletter that comes out from WIL. I cannot tell you how much the newsletter helps me keep in touch with everything going on in South Carolina. If you have something specific in your area for growth for women in leadership, please put it out there to Emily or to myself, and we will be happy to get that in the newsletter. So you can, I have traveled to Greenville from Rock Hill just to go to women leadership things in South Carolina. Anything to help women grow is what we should be working on. And Kimberly, thank you again for being here and being our speaker this month. Everybody have a great June, and we will see you again in August. Bye.